Ladies and gentlemen, the United States Strategic Petroleum Reserves, around 700 plus million barrels or so, exists for a dire national security moment, like an emergency. A time when we actually need to be self-sufficient and not rely on anyone else for fossil fuels. Okay? The Strategic Petroleum Reserves and President Mashed Potato Brains in his release of 180 million barrels being sold to countries like China, who are geopolitical adversaries. I mean, you can look. Just type in South China Sea, U.S., and here Forbes, Chinese military claims it drove away U.S. Navy ship operating in South China Sea. So they are geopolitical rivals. Okay, we're selling them fossil fuels so they can power their navy. And it's not rational. But then again, you're talking about Democrats. So there's no rationality there. It's just, we have to address climate change by flooding the country full of strategic petroleum reserves and then selling it to our geopolitical adversaries. That's the way they think. Okay, you have to understand. And then they have this monstrosity of public relations like factcheck.org. U.S. selling oil from Strategic Petroleum Reserve to the highest bidding companies. What's the problem? They're commodities. If it's a company that, by the way, is linked to Hunter, it's just because they gave us more money than any other company. This is like they're all over the place, Democrats. They start off with Joe Biden saying we're gonna combat climate change and save the planet. Then he ends up getting sued by oil and gas associations and 14 states. His energy policies directly lead to all-time highs in gas prices and all-time highs in demand for commodities, especially fossil fuels. But then he reverses course and then is sued by environmental groups, in large part because he's flooding the country with 180 million barrels of strategic petroleum reserves, not meant to make up for bad policies, failures in terms of his initial energy policies, okay? He's the only president in history, Mashed Potato Brains, to get sued by oil and gas associations and environmental groups. So he has no clue who he's pandering to, okay? But getting to Joe Manchin doesn't want to. I mean, the man is right. If you want to combat climate change, do so when you have, a viable alternative to fossil fuels. Don't engage in a Green New Deal legislation, an ambitious, attempt at saving the planet. You Democrats and people around the world who want to save the planet single-handedly propelled fossil fuels to all-time highs because there is no immediate replacement. You can't, wind and solar will not immediately replace oil and gas. Electric power plants, the electric grid, vehicles. Diesel fuel, we have a shortage of diesel exhaust fluid. Diesel fuel is at all-time highs. If it gets any higher, you're looking at a possible depression, not just a recession that will last longer than 2 quarters, almost certainly. But here, Biden pledges executive action after Joe Manchin destroys climate agenda. West Virginia senator refuses to support funding for climate crisis. Well, if it's a climate crisis, why is Biden flooding the country full of strategic petroleum reserves? Oh, that's right. Because Democrats want their cake. They always want their cake and eat it too. There's always an overreach. It's a climate crisis. But we have to flood strategic petroleum reserves. Which one is it? Which one is it? If you don't have the technology to replace existing, the 90% of the U.S. economy is run on oil and gas and diesel, okay? Especially diesel fuel. So, you don't, electric cars are not going to replace the diesel trucks that farmers and supermarkets, and if you look at the big cost increase in food prices, it's the diesel trucks that transport food, and it's the manufacturing equipment in co-packers and on farms and in the food industry. They run on diesel, and diesel fuel is at an all-time high. His energy policies directly led to this. It's so interesting. I don't have Twitter, I don't have Facebook, but it's so interesting how, like, you'll see Democrats like, we have all the oil we need right now. And then we don't, because he's flooding strategic petroleum reserves in an effort to lower the cost of oil per barrel in this country. But it's going to get, demand is going to outpace supply very soon. That's why Warren Buffett's like spending hundreds of millions of dollars buying oil stocks now. Hit subscribe to this channel. Hit subscribe to the Nuclear Confrontation and Stock Market Crash channel. And also hit subscribe to the Bitcoin 10K Oil Prices 150 Recession channel. So I have 3 channels, all uplifting. And check out the segment prior to this one on the Durham Probe Special Counsel. The next trial is October 11th, just in a couple of months or so. And I explain why people shouldn't be like, oh, nothing's ever going to happen. I explain. Watch that segment prior to this one. But ladies and gentlemen, Joe Manchin isn't going ahead, and the policies, okay, you're not going to combat climate with, if you think you want to combat climate change, which is a serious issue, do so when you have the technology to do so. Also, don't flood the country full of strategic petroleum reserves, then blame oil and gas companies after they sued you because their policies made their business more difficult to operate. And so oil companies lost tens of billions of dollars 2 years ago because Democrats and experts and bureaucrats gleefully tanked the U.S. economy. Of course, there was absolutely no political motive in doing so. It wasn't also to kick Trump out of office. No. They were giving Andrew Cuomo an Emmy for tanking his state economy. And it was to help people. Yes, of course I believe this. Yes. Anyway, it was a choice. So you can't just say, well, it was the you-know-what that made us do it. No, it was a choice. Sweden didn't do that. You didn't have to do that. Okay? States also that didn't enact such draconian laws, compare the rates of, we can just compare certain rates in terms of those states and how people did. Anyway, the most draconian measures didn't work. We see that. But again, Democrats love draconian measures because it proves they're doing something. Any tragedy, we have to do something. Well, what if it's the wrong thing to do and it makes things worse? And it doesn't matter. Do something, anything. And then media comes up with the fact check article. U.S. selling oil from strategic petroleum reserve. And this is why Joe Manchin is right. Not to he should just become Republican. For God's sake, just maybe, you know what? Maybe he just wants to dominate the Democratic Party in West Virginia, which he does. So that's why he won't become Republican. Furthermore, U.S. already exports plenty of oil to other countries, including China, and has done so for years. I mean, yes, fact check. Yes. Do you think that this time period is the same as years past? Do you think that perhaps we shouldn't be selling oil to geopolitical rivals when we have a geopolitical nightmare in Europe? You think maybe we should do we shouldn't have, or I should say Biden shouldn't have made it difficult for oil and gas companies to operate here? We have refinery capacity running at 95%. American refineries are operating at 95% capacity, according to Yahoo Finance. We should really have more oil refineries, but it takes like 5 to 7 years to build and $5+ billion for investment. And you want zero emissions. You want to do away with carbon emissions and fossil fuels within 20 years. So nobody wants to make these investments. And the investment needed for the oil and gas industry in the U.S. to really prosper isn't there now. Now you'll have the people who voted for mashed potato brains saying, we have to save the planet. And then they're saying, oh, the oil companies are price gouging. Anyone who says that oil companies are price gouging is an imbecile who knows nothing about the economy. You can't say that oil companies are price gouging when 2 years ago demand plummeted because Democrats and bureaucrats and media and experts, the wonderful experts who are always right, trust them, said, oh, tank your economies, and it's to help people. And then the supply and demand projections were obliterated. Demand for oil plummeted. Oil companies lost tens of billions of dollars. And then when demand for oil was ramping up, Biden waived Nord Stream 2 sanctions right before you-know-who invaded, because Mashed Potato Brains is an absolute genius, and his son Hunter are wonderful people that definitely didn't do anything wrong. I mean, unless you read their emails, then you know that they probably committed numerous crimes. Anyway, then he went ahead and put a moratorium, banned leasing on federal lands, and then did other things, and then he was sued by the oil and gas associations and by 14 states. And within the lawsuits, they say that his policies directly impact the price of oil and gas. Of course, Democrats, like they never read Hunter's emails, they also never read the lawsuits leveled against the current president, Mashed Potato. So then they say, well, it's price gouging. They shouldn't be making a profit, God forbid, like Apple and Microsoft and everything else that they like. You'll never see somebody who dislikes Trump saying Apple's making too much money, the iPhone's too expensive. But the oil and gas companies, when there's literally an effort to do away with them and make their business more expensive and deter anyone from investing in oil and gas, well, what do you think is going to happen when there's also a shortage of labor, shortage of oil, shortage of fracking sand, shortage of commodities they need? And you have a shortage of refinery capacity. Yes, it's something called capitalism. Something called capitalism, which Democrats don't like also, and then they complain the price goes up. So anyway, Joe Manchin is right. I mean, he destroyed Biden's climate agenda, and Biden himself is destroying it also. But see, again, Democrats, everything they touch turns to the fertilizer that is 400% more expensive. By the way, we're going to have a prolonged recession, and it could be flirting into a depression. We're going to have massive layoffs, and I predicted all of this in September of 2021. Read my article also in October of 2021 in the Federalist. We wouldn't have any of these problems with Trump. So, like, I don't want to sound like a gleeful liberal Democrat who are wonderful, highly educated people, but like, if you voted for this president, our wonderful president, Joe Biden, very lucid, very, aware of things, then you voted for this catastrophe in terms of an energy crisis and recession. Like, this is what you voted for. But again, people would rather have a public service announcement in New York on a potential nuclear strike than Trump tweeting. Okay. Anyway, hit subscribe to this channel. Hit subscribe to the Nuclear Confrontation and Stock Market Crash channel. I have a very important segment on there today. And hit subscribe to the oil prices, to the Bitcoin 10K, oil prices 150 recession channel. I'll finally have a segment on there today. I don't know why I've taken so long but away from there. But please go ahead and subscribe to all three channels. I'll have a live stream tonight at around 8 p.m. Pacific or so. And hit subscribe, ladies and gentlemen. Have a wonderful weekend and have a safe and wonderful Saturday. I'll be back in a couple of hours. Check this channel every 2 hours or so. Thank you.